Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Controversial comments. A Conservative candidate has apologized for a derogatory 2015 post he wrote about Palestinians. They have surfaced, and we're asking you, is this apology enough? How should the Conservatives deal with these comments? After 12:30, Hurricane Milton has pummeled through Florida. Why has it been so strong, and what role does climate change play? Our Darius Madavi will take your questions about severe weather events. And we'll hear about a festival highlighting the creativity of people with disabilities. I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. A warning first that there is offensive language in our first story. The BC Conservative candidate for Surrey South is apologizing after a 2015 social media post surfaced yesterday. Brent Chapman commented on someone's post about Muslims on the page Conservatives for 2019. His post called Palestinians, quote, all little inbred walking, talking, breathing time bobs, figuratively and quite literally, end quote. The post was shared yesterday on X by CKNW radio host Jazz Johal. Now, CBC News has not independently verified the post, but our reporter Katie DeRosa sought comment from Chapman, who sent this statement. The language I used and the sentiments I expressed at that time toward Palestinians and members of the Islamic faith were completely unacceptable. They do not reflect who I am today or the respect and admiration I hold for the Palestinian and Muslim communities. I want to offer my sincerest apologies to everyone hurt by my past words. Since making those comments a decade ago, I've had the privilege of traveling to Muslim-majority countries and building meaningful relationships with members of the Muslim community in Canada. These experiences have broadened my understanding of Islam and deepened my appreciation for the incredible contributions Muslims make in our communities, both locally in Surrey and across Canada. I am truly sorry for the pain my words have caused. I take full responsibility for my past actions and am committed to continuing to learn, grow, and stand in solidarity with all communities I may have harmed. End quote. That is a statement from Brent Chapman sent to CBC. This morning, Conservative leader John Rustad was in North Vancouver to make an announcement about ferries, and he was asked about what he was going to do about Brent Chapman's post. He said he accepts Chapman's apology.
Well, there's no question that the statement that he made, those comments from 10 years ago, I found offensive, and I know many other people do. People sometimes make mistakes. However, I think what is important is actions. And so we'll see. Brent has already reached out, like I say, to the candidates, to the people on our team, and apologized. They have accepted that apology.
Well, we're asking you, is an apology enough? How should the BC Conservative Party handle its candidate's past post? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca. And CBC Provincial Affairs reporter Katie DeRosa joins me now. Hi, Katie.
Hi, Michelle.
So you were there this morning at the John Rustad announcement. You were one of the reporters asking questions. How did he handle those questions at today's press conference?
Well, certainly the focus was supposed to be about shipping, about ferries, but the focus was completely overtaken by the questions around his candidate, Brent Chapman. And he repeated, after repeated questions about whether this candidate would be asked to step aside, step off the Conservative slate. Rustad said he stood behind Chapman. He repeated what he said about, it was 10 years ago. So he sort of made that clear. And he, basically says he has, apologized to Muslim communities of the Conservative Party and, took responsibility. So Rustad stood behind him. He said the party does not stand for hatred, for Islamophobia, for anti-Semitism, or for any kind of offensive comments. But again, he felt that he had confidence. I asked him, can he represent the Surrey community, which is very diverse? He's running in Surrey South, and Rustad felt he had, he has the confidence in his candidate, so he's not dropping him.
And he sent a statement to you. last night. Brent Chapman did, and that included a statement as well from a fellow candidate, Zed Mosen, who is running in Vancouver, Kensington. Tell us a bit more about this candidate and what they had to say.
Right. So, Syed said in his statement, I have not talked to him specifically, but in the statement, he said he spoke to Chapman and that he was confident that he's done the work since that post. Again, also flagging that it was 10 years ago. He says he feels confident that he's done the work to repair, to broaden his understanding. So he feels that the statements from that time do not reflect who Brent is. And again, he's confident he could be part of the team.
So, this was really taking up a lot of the discussion yesterday on X. What has been the reaction to the story?
Well, there certainly are people on social media saying he should resign, that the apology is not good enough. The National Council of Canadian Muslims said they were horrified by the comments. They called them Islamophobic and disgusting. However, they did not call for Chapman to be removed. They said, their members have talked to him directly. They feel satisfied with the apology, but they said that they want to see action going forward. They said the apology has to be followed up with meaningful action to repair the harm and to promote a policy going forward that will not tolerate any Islamophobia.
My guest is CBC Provincial Affairs reporter Katie DeRosa, and we are following up on offensive comments that were made in a 2015 social media post posted by Conservative candidate for Surrey South, Brent Chapman. He has apologized for this comment, and the leader of the party, John Rustad, has said he accepts the apology, asking you what you think. Is the apology enough, and how should the Conservative Party deal with these comments? Let's take your calls, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. Robin is calling us from Sydney. Hi, Robin. What are your thoughts?
Well, I have a couple of thoughts. One is that, of course, I would expect that John Rustad would forgive his candidate. I think that the Conservative government has a long history of very offensive, racially remarks. I'm trying to parse my words here, but this particular government has had other people make these kinds of inflammatory statements, and by saying that, oh, it was years ago, I think that's disingenuous. People are who they are. I think people that hold these deeply racist and Islamophobic beliefs don't change them. So I think they change them because now they have an opportunity in an election to perhaps win a seat. So therefore, we're going to mask the way that we really feel about certain segments of our society. So I think it rings hollow, and I think that BC knows better. And I hope that the people of British Columbia don't elect a Conservative government, because I think that we need to look towards other Conservative governments across the country to see what happens when we do that. So those are just my thoughts.
I appreciate your call, Robin. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's Robin joining us from Sydney. And again, taking your calls, asking you, she says that apology rings hollow. What do you think? Is this apology from Surrey South Conservative candidate Brent Chapman enough? How should the Conservative Party deal with these comments? And our number again, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Let me just go back to Katie DeRosa, and I'll ask you, David Eby was asked about this today in terms of his reaction. What has been the reaction from the NDP, from David Eby?
Well, David Eby basically said that this is not a one-off. He said that this is a pattern of statements that have come out from conservative candidates, and he pointed to time and time again Rustad standing behind them. He said that it classifies as hate speech, like criminal hate speech. He's speaking as a lawyer, and so again, he's trying to use it as a way to paint the entire Conservative slate as conspiratorial, having views that are not in line with the values of British Columbia. And so he was really amplifying that today. And here's what he said.
I've been made aware of this candidate's comments. It's deeply and profoundly disturbing to actually know that a grown adult in British Columbia who is running for public office would promote these hateful views online, would publish them and try to influence people's opinions against children, against Muslims. And when I look at it as a lawyer, I say this is all of the elements of criminal speech, of hate speech. And he's protected from prosecution only by the fact that it's been more than 6 months since he made those statements.
And now it's important to note the Conservatives, before the campaign officially started, they did drop some candidates. There were candidates on Vancouver Island that they dropped. One candidate had called people who attend gay pride parades degenerates. Another candidate was basically saying vaccines turn you into magnets. Those candidates were dropped, but there are some candidates right now who have made controversial statements about the LGBT community, about Indigenous people. David Eby released a list of candidates he thought should be dropped, and Rustad has stood behind them. So it's the Conservatives Party's decision to keep and
Referring to our previous caller as well, you talk in terms of the candidates who have been dropped. Damon Grace, who was a candidate for Courtney Comox, made those offensive posts about the 2S LGBTQ plus community, and Stephen Malthouse, who was the candidate for Ladysmith Oceanside, was dropped by the party after his views on COVID-19 and vaccines were circulated. And looking back as well, the BC Green Party had its own controversy in 2023. They fired their deputy leader, Dr. Sanjeev Gandhi, for liking a tweet, again, a warning here on the offensive language, that compared Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry to a Nazi doctor who had presided over deadly medical experiments at the Auschwitz death camp. At the time, Gandhi apologized and said he had inadvertently liked the post, but Green Party leader Sonia Furstenau posted at the time, "I find this unacceptable. I have removed Dr. Gandhi as deputy leader," and the NDP Health Minister Adrian Dix called the behavior revolting and disrespectful. So some of the history there when it comes to these controversial posts. Let's take your calls, again asking you today, what do you think should the Conservative Party do in light of these comments that have surfaced from a 2015 post by Surrey South candidate Brent Chapman? He has apologized. Is that apology enough? And how should the Conservatives deal with it? 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. Our next caller is Mike from Vancouver. Hi, Mike.
Oh, hi. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I started listening to this whole thing about the post from 9 years ago and the outrage from people about, the content and all that, and the person having to deal with it one way or another, or the voters having to deal with it one way or another right now. But what bothered me so much more than that, that's 9 years ago. Someone just got sentenced to 10 years in jail for killing somebody. They'll be out in 10 years. But yesterday it was announced on the CBC that John Rustad had said that he'd seen someone overdose and die in the street. He seems to have been pulled back from that and said, no, he really didn't see that happen at all. That is such an extreme statement to make to the public. For election votes, I think to me that really stands out way more than a post that happened 9 years ago. That the person may have gone through a lot of changes or not. I don't know that person at all, but I know John Rustad is the head of a political party today, and he's making this kind of outrageous, ridiculous statement to get attention.
This is from the debate.
Mind, frankly, if I were voting Conservative, I would take my vote away from him just on that one thing.
Okay.
How can you say that? I saw someone die in the street because of an overdose, and it never happened.
He says that in the end, he says on X that I'm just going to pull up his post here, and he posted a picture of the scene, and he says, "This is what I saw before the debate last night. It occurred near the intersection of Burrard and Davie. I did not take this photo. It was sent to me. There was an ambulance at the scene when I saw it, rather. My staff walked by as CPR was happening. One lady said, 'He's overdosed.' Another said, 'He's gone.' And Rustad goes on to say, 'I'm overjoyed to hear a life was saved thanks to heroic efforts of first responders.'" Mike,
this is the afterword of his first post, wasn't it?
Yes. So, of his comment at the debate. Mike, thank you very much for raising that. Let's actually hear and just remind ourselves of that moment in the debate on Tuesday.
I was on my way over here, and at the corner of Robson and Hornby, there's an individual who died. And there was emergency people rushing. This person died from an overdose.
And that was the clip from the debate. Anything more you want to add to that story?
Yeah, well, Rustad actually was asked about that today at the press conference, and he admitted that the location was wrong, and he didn't admit that he was basically trying to say the point of the story was to show people that these overdoses are happening every day. So he, was like, I guess, apologized for being mistaken on some of the finer details, but of course it is a big detail whether or not the person died. But I think he was trying to make his point about the overdose crisis and how many people it's affecting. But certainly, for many people, it's a concern about how can we trust what you say. So that question was put to him, and he was a bit on the defensive on it today.
Let's take another call here. What do you make of the apology from Conservative candidate Brent Chapman? Is it enough? And how should the BC Conservative Party deal with his past comments? And Jillian is on the line in Vancouver. What do you think should be done, Jillian?
Oh, I think he absolutely should be told to step down. The biggest thing for me about all of this, whether it be here or the States or wherever, is common decency and kindness. That I don't want to vote for anybody that even has that thought, let alone express that thought. And it boggles my mind over and over again when people are caught saying things that are so horrible, so cruel, so damaging to groups. It really boggles my mind. I'm 63 years old, and I have never, ever uttered anything like that. That's not how I was raised. That's not my belief. I believe that we need to be kind, generous, thoughtful. And I don't want to vote for anybody that doesn't have those characters as well.
Jillian, thank you so much for the call from Vancouver. And our next caller now is Roman in Port Alberni. Hi, Roman.
Hi, good afternoon to you. Thanks for taking my call today.
Sure thing.
I think the caller previous to me said exactly what I feel about the Canadian question, and I think he's doing his best to try and remedy, how to. But my concern on this, and with all instances of this, which are unfortunately looking like a trend, is that there's a trend towards doubling down instead of, even going through an act of contrition as a party, whereby the leadership and or the party itself decides, okay, we're not going to cow to whatever that is. If you're offended, deal with it. We're here to run government. And to me, that shows a high level of disconnect, B, a level of narcissism that's dangerous, and C, a really inconsistent sort of approach to democratic processes whereby the very people who are now saying, this doesn't require a step down, this doesn't require any punitive measures, are at the same breath demanding high degrees of accountability from parties across the floor, from which they may be the official opposite to. So there seems to be a high level of a lack of credibility to the approach that's being taken at the level for the BC Conservative Party, and this is my personal opinion on this, but it seems to be an unfortunate trend in the whole Canadian political landscape that we're borrowing these modus operandi from neighbors that seem to suggest that power and authority are the ultimate.
Roman, my apologies for jumping in. Your phone is just cutting out there. Are you able to if we can hear you? So I'm guessing that the comment or the statement from John Rustad this morning was not that contrition you were looking for.
Well, it's disconnected.
Okay.
It's disconnected. It's more or less, saying just, this is not a matter for us to deal with. You're just going to have to deal with it. Just take it or leave it. It's up to you. And to me, that's not a sign of the kind of thing someone would be wanting to do if they're seeking your vote to get into power.
Roman,
And if they're demanding change, that's not the approach I think would be the best
thank
way
you.
to take.
Thank you very much, Roman. Good to hear from you. Joe is next in West Vancouver now. Hi, Joe.
Hello, hi. Good afternoon, good morning to you, and thank you so much for the continued election coverage here on CBC Vancouver.
Well, thanks so much for calling. And what are your thoughts on what you've heard and whether the apology goes far enough?
Yeah, I don't believe that the apology goes far enough, and I'm a big believer that actions, and especially continued actions over time, speak much louder than any words. I'm a 25-year-old health sciences student, and I believe that in a time like today, when there's so much misinformation going around, promoting candidates who continue to peddle misinformation, continually not walking back statements about anti-vaxxing, the comments that were made about Bonnie Henry and wanting to put her through Nuremberg-like trials is not productive to Canadians living here. It's not productive to our health. And I think it's just stoking more fears in our populace.
Joe, thank you very much for the call as well from West Vancouver. And let's, I know I have another call now, and we're going to go to Mohammed in West Vancouver after the news break, because I want to be able to spend more time with Mohammed. So if you don't mind holding on the line, Mohammed, that would be great. Thank you. Katie, any final thoughts? Where does this story go now? I know you're very busy today.
Well, I think that it depends on how the Muslim community feels. I think that's where some of them have accepted his apology. I talked to a gentleman in Surrey named Saeed, who's, he also didn't fully call for Chapman to be removed, but he again said he wants to see the policies going forward, that they're going to do the work on anti-Islamophobia. So I think that will be a decision for people before the election.
October 19th.
Yes.
Katie, thank you so much. You're on a marathon, a sprint every day. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you. Thanks, Michelle.
Really appreciate it. Katie DeRosa is CBC's Provincial Affairs reporter. This is BC Today. It's just about 12:28 now. And yesterday, we took your calls on the leaders' debate earlier this week, and lots of emails coming in. Heather wrote us, safe injection sites. We forget that in addition to their role in preventing overdose deaths, safe injection sites prevent disease transmission through the provision and safe disposal of needles. This helps protect and reduce costs for all of us by reducing transmission of diseases such as hepatitis C and HIV. Trudy wrote, Sonia Firstenau reminded us of the big picture regarding climate change. She was totally on point because many of the shorter term issues, housing, cost of living, forestry, the toxic drug crisis, are linked to the deterioration of the systems that support everything that we humans do. Climate change. EB also pointed out that the whole world is in a housing and cost of living crisis, largely due to the pandemic, but also Russia's invasion of Ukraine. We had a caller who worked in forestry and blamed the NDP government for the industry's downturn. And Chris wrote in response from Tofino, the forest industry has to change, but a green transition means no one gets left behind. We have to change our careers. There are no jobs on a dead planet. I'm voting green. And Richard wrote, they never mentioned our hospitals closing down every weekend, it seems, in Kamloops, Oliver, Kelowna, etc., and how they're going to help seniors' healthcare or people with disabilities or those living on the streets. And David writes from Abbotsford, other than a few points by the Green Party leader and perhaps some platitudes by the NDP leader, there was very little substance mentioned about higher education in BC. We need to hear more about excessive student debt and program viability in the wake of international student cuts, student housing, and cost of living issues. Thanks for all your emails. Got lots of them. BC Today at cbc.ca. This is BC Today here on CBC. We're live on Radio 1, CBC Television, and live streaming as well on cbc.ca/BC, on YouTube and CBC Vancouver, as well as the CBC News app. And coming up in our next half hour, we are going to get the reaction to our first segment from Mohammed waiting on the line in West Vancouver. And then we'll be joined by CBC's Darius Madavi to talk about Hurricane Milton. And he'll explain its behavior, why it has been so severe, and he'll take your questions. And we'll hear about a new festival that's taking place, the Outside Arts Festival, coming up. That's after this CBC News Update with Rob Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. As we've been hearing on the show, a BC Conservative candidate has apologized for derogatory comments he made about Palestinians on social media almost 10 years ago. Brent Chapman, the candidate for Surrey South, says his comments were completely unacceptable and says he stands in solidarity with all communities he may have harmed. Leader John Rustad says he accepts the apology. Meanwhile, NDP leader David Eby says Chapman's comments amount to criminal hate speech. Eby told the media at a campaign event in Coquitlam today that a candidate who engages in hate speech should be fired. And advanced voting has begun ahead of the provincial election. Voting locations are open from 8 in the morning until 8 at night until Sunday. They will reopen again next Tuesday and Wednesday. A complete list of locations is available online on the Elections BC website. And now the forecast on the north coast. Showers this afternoon with a high of 7. Highs reaching 12 and sunny in the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, mainly sunny with a high of 11 degrees. Highs up to 19 with sunshine in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, sunny with a high of 18. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, mainly sunny this afternoon with highs to 16 degrees. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
And as our resident tennis expert, Rob, your
Yes.
thoughts on Rafa Nadal announcing
Well,
he's
it seems like
retiring?
it's time. It's too bad, obviously, losing Federer a couple years ago, but he's had a lot of injuries. He's
Yeah.
hung in there a long time. So, yeah, it's obviously sad.
Yeah. Yes, I'm sure. And you're right. He did talk about the injuries. Looking forward to the new crop, perhaps?
Oh yeah,
of tennis greats?
yeah. Well, that's the thing is that with Alcaraz and Sinner and stuff, it's I mean maybe not quite as good as the the old big three, but we're getting there. It's pretty fantastic tennis. Yeah.
Okay. Well, that no shortage of it for tennis fans like yourself, anyway.
Yeah. No, it's great.
Well, good to talk to you, Rob. Thanks so
You bet.
much.
Yeah.
Robert Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. You're with BC Today here on CBC. I'm Michelle Elliott. Thanks so much for joining us. You can listen to us on radio, watch us live on CBC television or online anytime too. You can just catch us on demand on CBC Listen. You can use the app to listen to us or watch us on demand on YouTube. Just search for CBC Vancouver. Mohammed is calling us now from West Vancouver to comment on the Brent Chapman story. Again, a post that he made, a derogatory post about Palestinians made in 2015 on Facebook has surfaced. It was on a page called Conservatives for 2019. And that has surfaced now. He has apologized for it. And he says, the language I used and the sentiments I expressed at the time toward Palestinians and members of the Islamic faith were completely unacceptable. That's part of his apology. Let's take a call. We've been asking you if the apology is enough. Mohammed in West Vancouver, thanks so much for holding on.
Yes, thank you so much for taking my call. But before I begin, you can hear me loud and clear, correct?
We sure can. Go ahead.
Fantastic. Yes, I'm calling you here from the Vancouver area on the North Shore. And as a member of the Muslim community, I can say that I don't accept his apology. I know my brother Saeed in Surrey might have accepted an apology, but one thing he forgot to also say is that we won't forget. And that the conservatives, this is nothing new. From trying to ban our sisters from taking the citizenship ceremony for wearing a niqab and calling these kinds of things barbaric practices, to the various geopolitical stances they've taken against Muslims. This is something that we can never forget. And in fact, it's because of comments like this gentleman right now who just said those things. I mean, hey, he want to say that was 10 years ago, but what's been happening to the Palestinians has been happening to a long time. And then what's going on with the NDP? You had Selena Robinson make that comment. Sure, she might have resigned after a lot of protests from our community, but she didn't get kicked out of that party either.
She did apologize.
That's one of the reasons why I'm not even going to vote this particular election, because it's like, who do we even go to right now? You know what I mean? All of them, some way, somehow, got some kind of low-key, slick agenda against the Muslims. So that's just, I just really appreciate you taking my call and hearing from a Muslim how I feel in particular about these comments.
Mohammed, thank you very much for the call. Good to hear from you. Important to hear from you. And Mohammed in West Vancouver. And just to also follow up that Selena Robinson did issue an apology after the that incident that had been recorded from a meeting. And she said she was working with Muslim groups following that. Your calls, your emails now to bctoday@cbc.ca. We'll continue to take them and read them on the program tomorrow. Right now, it is 12:36, and we go to the impact of Hurricane Milton in Florida. At least 5 people are dead, 3.4 million without power, and Florida's governor says the storm was significant, pounding with winds and rain and whipping up a barrage of tornadoes. However, it was not the worst-case scenario. And Milton comes just 2 weeks after Hurricane Helene, you'll recall. We're asking you can call us now with your questions about these severe weather events, their behavior. What do you want to know about the role of climate change? What about preparation and response? You can call us 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone as well. Now, earlier this week, a forecast by Florida meteorologist John Morales certainly struck a chord with many.
It's just an incredible, incredible, incredible hurricane. It has dropped 50 millibars in 10 hours. I apologize. This is just horrific.
That is John Morales, a meteorologist with NBC6 South Florida. Now, John actually spoke this morning with Stephen Quinn on CBC's The Early Edition, and he explained why he became emotional.
There's a lot of things that have been building up. There's angst over the extreme weather events becoming more severe and more frequent. There's frustration over being a climate communicator for over 20 years, urging people and governments to take action, and not enough, of course, has been done. And then also, I mean, frankly, just empathy. I think somewhere I saw an article that's called anticipatory grieving. But I think all those things came together and led to that moment.
Well, you can call us now with your questions, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. What do you want to know about, how Hurricane Milton fits into a pattern of severe weather events that, of course, we have been seeing more frequently? 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your phone as well, or send us your question by email, bctoday@cbc.ca. And CBC's climate and science specialist Darius Madavi joins me now to take your questions. Hello there.
Hello.
We are looking at an image right now. Tell us what's the latest about the impact of Hurricane Milton.
Right. So the storm has now moved off of Florida. It moved over the entire Florida peninsula as a hurricane, weakening somewhat as it went. But we still have tropical storm warnings in place for the south coast of South Carolina, the coast of South Carolina, because the storm is still packing very strong winds over 100 kilometers per hour that are reaching shore. Part of what made this storm so devastating and so concerning is that even though it weakened as it approached Florida, it also got quite a bit bigger as it made that approach. That meant that the entire state of Florida, with the exception of a tiny portion of the Florida Panhandle, experienced tropical storm force winds, which are very damaging. They can, rip the shingles off of roofs and smash windows. And so we're continuing to get a sense of the impact that the storm had. Some places, including Tampa, saw as much as 450 millimeters of rain, a foot and a half of rain in a matter of hours. The flooding there is still, we're getting a sense of it again. A lot of roads were completely flooded, and that's without storm surge. Other places saw the storm surge and those really heavy rains. We definitely missed the worst case scenario, which is very good news. The worst case scenario was that the storm passed north of Tampa. When that happens, because the winds around a hurricane blow counterclockwise, we would have seen those really strong winds push all the water in Tampa Bay up into the city. Instead, because the storm passed south of Tampa, instead what we saw was those winds pulling the water out of Tampa Bay. So there's actually some really incredible visuals, aerial shots of Tampa Bay just being emptied out by those winds that are just pulling all the water away from the city, which is honestly completely changed the progression of the storm. If that hadn't happened, if it had hit Tampa or moved north of Tampa, this would be a much, much worse picture right now.
Wow. But can you explain why it did get as severe as it was and so soon after Helene?
Yeah, so normally after we would see a hurricane move through an area, we would see an upwelling of cool water from underneath because a hurricane draws its power from the warm water and evaporation, but usually there's a lot cooler water underneath. So after a hurricane passes over an area, after Helene moved over, drew a path right through there, right up between Cuba and Mexico and then up towards the Florida Panhandle, we would have seen an upwelling of really cold water there. But because the Gulf of Mexico has these record warm temperatures that aren't just at the sea surface, they're also all the way deep down into the water as well. We see not just record sea surface temperatures, but also ocean heat content. So deep down, we also have warm water. So after Helene passed through, we saw upwelling of still warm water, which is why Milton was able to pass over that area without really encountering cool water. If it encountered waters below 26.5 degrees Celsius, we would have seen much more weakening. In this case, even though it encountered very strong wind shear that should have completely knocked the power out of the storm as it approached Florida, those really warm ocean temperatures allowed it to maintain a decent amount of its strength. And as it passed over the Yucatan Peninsula, we saw it strengthen to a Category 5 storm, weaken a little bit, and then re-strengthen to a Category 5. It approached record levels. It was the 5th strongest storm ever recorded in the Atlantic, the strongest ever recorded in the Gulf of Mexico, the second fastest to strengthen at the speed, to the second fastest strengthening. It was just, it smashed records, and we're very glad that it weakened before it hit Florida.
Wow. Now, what does that, you talked about the impact of the warmer sea surface temperatures, not just on the surface, but much deeper as well. So tell us about that and, the role of climate change that's contributed to it.
Well, we've put a lot of extra heat into the atmosphere because we put out more carbon dioxide, it traps more heat, but we've talked a lot in the last year, especially about approaching that 1.5 degrees Celsius limit for global air temperature, which we're not near yet. We saw big spikes over it because of El Nino and other contributing factors, but we're getting closer and closer. But that's only air temperature, when in reality, the oceans have absorbed 91% of the excess heat that humans have generated through climate change. Wow. So the oceans are warming very, very quickly. Attribution science is often something that we look at, where we say, climate change made that heat wave, 50% more likely or twice as likely. But if you look at the ocean heat, this level of heat wave in the ocean, this is hundreds of times more likely because ocean temperatures, water is so much more difficult to heat up, especially over such a large area. Being able to reach these levels of temperatures would have been virtually impossible without climate change. So you can say that this is 300, 500 times more likely than it would have been, and that magnitude, which wouldn't make sense for air temperatures in almost all cases, does work for the water because it's absorbing so much heat.
Right. So what was your reaction, I guess, listening and seeing the meteorologist, John Morales? He's saying, I've been giving, talking about the impact of climate change for so long, and this is just bearing the sort of the length of time that he's been talking about it, and seeing the impacts now. What goes through your mind?
It was a difficult watch. I had at least, I think, 5 or 6 people send that video to me, and it was Ralph get it. He was getting, choked up on air. And it is difficult, especially because I'm sure he was, looking on social media, because oftentimes you have meteorologists posting stuff online. You have the fastest way to get information about a hurricane from on the ground is usually, sources like social media. But you also have to filter through a lot of people talking about, there's conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
There's people talking about how, meteorologists are exaggerating what it's going to be. And so when you have a case afterwards where you didn't get the worst case scenario, which, you have a responsibility to tell people what the worst could be, and then people are saying, see, it wasn't as bad, you start to worry that next time there's a storm and we do get the worst case scenario, people may not heed the advice because the previous time, we got a little bit luckier than we could have otherwise.
From scientists.
Yes, exactly. And so that is difficult. And then the other piece of this is I was talking about this yesterday on air, and I was talking about how, people were going to die. And we saw that. So far, we've heard about it from tornadoes, but we don't have a sense really much at all yet of the storm surge in some of these areas. And so we're expecting, officials have said, we're expecting to see those counts rise. And it's just difficult to deliver that, because that there are going to be people who don't heed the evacuation orders, who don't listen. And so it's difficult to have to say, there are people who are going to die. Please get out. Otherwise,
We did hear a lot of that advanced warning, but also, yes, people saying they were going to stay. I'll ask you more about that in terms of what preparation, governments and agencies can do as they expect these severe weather events. We're taking your questions for Darius as well, our climate and science specialist here at CBC. And what do you want to know about severe weather events like Hurricane Milton, like Hurricane Helene? And what are your questions about preparation, about response, about climate change? Our number is 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, and you can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Basil is on the line in Port Coquitlam. Hi, Basil. Yes, thanks for calling in.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for your guests for coming to the phone. I appreciate your program. Yes, my simple question for your guest, what's the solution? What can we all do to prevent this from happening, to save our planet, to help the children and grandchildren we claim we love? What can we do? What should we do?
Well, there's one ultimate solution to prevent the escalating effects of climate change, which is, to ease off of and eliminate fossil fuels, because that's what drives climate change and that's what makes these extreme weather events worse. In terms of what we can do, in the meantime, because we've committed to a certain level at this point of, ocean warming. Even if we stopped emitting fossil fuels entirely right now, we've committed to a decade or two of further ocean warming. So mitigation efforts also have to be made. One of the most important things that we can do right now is improve our prediction ability, because the better we can predict these things, the more advanced warning we can give people, the more prepared people can be. I'm happy to say that's improved a lot in just the last decade. Rapid intensification events are becoming much more common, and that's part of what makes a lot of these hurricanes so dangerous. We saw it with Helene, we saw it with Milton. Rapid intensification, where the storm just grows so much stronger, and our models can capture that now, and they predict that fairly well, whereas even 5-10 years ago, which we saw with various hurricanes that strengthened much more quickly than we were expecting, we didn't have that capability. And so people were often caught off guard, which we've seen with hurricanes in Florida as well. So that advance warning is very important, very valuable. And then I should also mention just, rapid intensification is... Hurricanes are one of the most difficult weather events to untangle the effects of climate change from, other effects when it comes to hurricanes versus, a heat wave or a single extreme rainfall event. But one of the most clear connections between climate change and hurricanes is rapid intensification. There have been several studies that have very clearly shown that it's becoming more common. And actually, since 2017, we've had more hurricanes rapidly intensify than we did in the 50 years before that. So this is becoming a much more real danger and much more quickly.
I have an email here asking, how is this relevant to BC? Why should British Columbians care about this?
I mean, I think that extreme weather hits everybody. And I don't think that this is an event that is very widely covered, and you can make an argument that it doesn't affect Canadians directly. I mean, some people, especially I guess in Eastern Canada, this would affect more directly because people travel there more often. But this is one example of extreme weather that is getting worse because of climate change. We just saw with Helene, an attribution study actually just came out connecting the effects of Helene and how much worse they were because of climate change. That came out a couple days ago, but because of Milton, we haven't really had a chance to talk about it. We'll likely see another one of those studies to do with Milton, and we'll see how much, if any, impact climate change had on Milton in the days ahead. But I think these sort of weather events transcend borders. I know that we're not necessarily being hit by the storm directly, but this kind of thing affects everybody. We're talking disasters that have massive impacts on the economy. The area of Florida that was hit is, I think, 5% of Florida's economy was directly hit by the storm. And it's just, we're going to see this everywhere, and it does ripple out to everybody.
Good to have you with us to share the science on this, Darius. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That is Darius Madavi, CBC's climate and science specialist. Well, Vancouver audiences are in for a treat as the 8th annual Vancouver Outsider Arts Festival starts. It presents performances, workshops, talks, and exhibitions all weekend. And joining us now is Peter Lner, co-founder of the festival, and Kagan Go, who's a spoken word artist. Welcome. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Michelle. Nice to meet you.
It's very nice to meet you. And I see, Kagan, that you have a T-shirt on called From Mental Health to Mental Wealth.
Yeah.
How important is that to you?
It's very important. I live by the motto of the disabled arts, and the mad arts movement, which is nothing about us without us. And I believe that we should move from mental health to mental wealth in terms of abundance, put a positive spin on something which tends to have a negative connotation,
Is this what you explore through your art?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, for example, the Gifts of Madness art exhibition that we're doing at the Outside Arts Festival, you might ask yourself, why do we call it Gifts of Madness? Like I said, mental illness tends to have a negative connotation. When we think of mental illness in the news or the media or television or film, we think of straitjackets, padded cells, quiet rooms, electric shock treatment, or violence. We tend to think of the negative. And the way I would describe it is to quote the bipolar famous musician Lauryn Hill, our mission is to develop a negative into a positive picture.
And that's your goal.
Yes.
Wow. How is that? Can you can you tell us about this festival and how it pursues that goal?
Thank you very much. Yes, indeed. So we're the first and only such festival in Canada. So that's very important. The concept of outsiders is much more developed in Europe with special festivals and galleries and museums than in Canada. So often people ask me, what is an outsider artist? And their first thing is, well, do they work outside? No, this is nothing. This is not it. But the idea is, of course, if there are outsiders, there are insiders. So the reality, and this is not new, it's been like this for centuries. Insiders, particularly today, tend to be artists, very good artists. They get picked up relatively early in their career and then have access to resources and funders and can work full-time in their career and go on. Outsiders, on the other hand, often encounter barriers. So we're talking of people who have sometimes social, economic, even political barriers, and may also have physical or mental disabilities.
And these are the artists you highlight.
That's right, because they do not have they often in Canada do not have a place to show. This festival is therefore very important and very meaningful to it. So really it's great if the audience could come down, visit. This is a step of support for these artists. So it's not only just to see and buy sometimes if there's work that they
I like how you slid that in. Kagan's nodding yes.
Yeah. So, but being there is very meaningful.
And what can audiences expect then?
Okay, so we have over 56 artists, around 40 that are visual artists, so there's all forms of visual art. And there are singers and musicians and spoken word, Kagan being one, that will be performing throughout the days. The opening is tomorrow at 5:30. There will be also music by M. Girl and also by Terran Derek. And each day there will be performances during the day. There are also workshops, free, very important. All of this is free. There are workshops on photo, cyanotype printing, and also...
Lots going on, Kagan. I just have a minute left, but how big of a difference does this make for you?
It's huge. Essentially, the Mad Arts movement has changed my life as a spoken word poet. I'm known, for the last 30 years, I've been a spoken word poet in the Vancouver poetry scene. And amongst my peers, I'm half jokingly and half seriously dubbed the bipolar poet laureate. And it's through this that I became curator of the Gifts of Madness art exhibition, which has been touring from Penticton, then to the Connection Salon at the Gathering Place, and now the Outside Arts Festival. So come join us. It's going to be a Mad Pride festivities of celebration of the Mad Arts. It'd be crazy to miss it.
You got all the slogans, don't you? Wonderful. Yes. Mad love and love madly. I love it. Thank you so much to both of you. All the best with the festival.
Thank you so much, Michelle.
That's Kagan Go, a spoken word artist and mental illness advocate. Peter Lner, co-founder of VOAF, Community Arts Council of Vancouver board member, and the Vancouver Outside Arts Festival takes place at the Roundhouse Community Arts Center from October 11th to October 13th.